Hey everyone, I'm Joshua Deemer, and welcome back to Lesson 4 of our Java programming tutorial series. Let's jump right into the lesson. So before we delve into strings, let's talk about characters a little bit and how they work. So firstly, keep in mind that you need single quotes around characters. If you add double quotes, it will no longer be a character, but a string. So characters must be a single quote, and a character must not be more than one character, since after all, it is a character, right? The way that these characters work is inside of their character set, such as UTF-8, which we talked about, they're associated a number which goes down to the binary. So lowercase a starts at 97, which is 011000001. And then going down the alphabet, you can see that it increases by 1 every time until eventually you reach Z. Now characters are a little fun because you can actually take them and add them together. So if I said A plus equals D, there's no error, and now this would become 97 plus 100, which turns into 197. Now it's going to be the character that represents 197. Even if we did a number, since these characters are simply numbers, this is fine. This instead makes it go 97 plus 1 is equal to 98. So now lowercase a is equal to lowercase b because that's what 98 is. It's confusing because of the names. However, this a, because we added 1 to it, is now 98, which is what b is. So then, how do we go on and create a string of characters? I already said it in the name, but how do we go ahead and make a string of characters like this? How do we combine them all into a word? Well, that's what the strings are for, and you may have seen it up here, but string is a new type it's a new data type that we're gonna learn. It's not primitive, but you type in string as the type. Remember, our type name equals value, and then you name it, and you set it equal to something. Okay? Now, I'm going to get rid of this. But with strings, we do not use single quotes because that is for characters. It says invalid character constant. And even if we did this, it still wouldn't work because it cannot convert a character to a string. So to use strings, we use double quotes. And we say hello. There's no issue here besides that we're not using the variable because these double quotes represent a string. Now what a string is it's basically a list of characters. So if we open up hello.character at 1, then it'll get the character at the second position because in programming you start counting at 0. Okay, so you get the second character, so the character at 1 is E. And so if we hover over this, you'll see that it returns a character. So we could actually say character E is equal to this. Now this might seem confusing at first. We'll go into it a little bit more in a second, but this is just to show you that strings are comprised of a list of characters. Now, let's go over some functions of strings. It's pretty important to know these functions, but you don't need to get familiar with them immediately. You can test it out a little bit yourself inside of your own Eclipse program. So, what's up with this string here? There's a capital, there's two lowercases, there's spaces all over the place. How do we clean this up? Let's say this is exactly what someone typed in as their first name. In fact, let's change this to first and say this is Joshua. Okay? Well, I don't want to save this to a file or a database as space Joshua space. That doesn't make any sense. So what I can do, in fact, let's also add an exclamation point at the end because I was feeling really weird. Okay? So what you can do is you can say first, and then you put a period. What this period does is it accesses certain functions of this variable. Now, if we were to make an integer a equals 0 and type a dot, you'll notice that there isn't any such functions because this is a primitive data type. These functions are specific to class or structure-based data types such as string. If you really wanted to get what an integer could do, you would type the whole thing out and have a capital I, but that's a lesson for another day. So just keep in mind that it has to not be a primitive data type in order for you to access its functions. Now, Java comes with a bunch of different functions that you can use in order to show or do something with your strings. Okay, like for example, this character at. What this function does is it asks you, firstly, inside of these parentheses, these are called arguments, they're parameters inside of elsewhere, but these are called arguments, and so you're going to, it says you needs an integer as an argument. That integer is the position of the character you want to get. So if we want to get the first character, we say 0. The second character would be 1. The third character would be 2, because remember, you start counting with 0 in programming. Okay? And I'll show you why in a little bit, but for now, you'll just have to believe me that that's what it is. Now, if we hover over it, you'll see that it's java.lang.string.character at int index. You can kind of ignore that, but what I want to focus on is this word here, character. Now that's what it returns. So when you process this, it will return a specific value. And that value is a character for this. And so, like I did before, we can store, say, capital J as the first character. If I change this to, say, Boolean, this would actually throw an error because the return type is a character. Okay, so let's make this a character. Alright, so that's one of its functions. Let's go over a few more. So let's say that we want to lowercase it all. Well, we would say first dot to lowercase. You can also add a locale, like such as from Canada or from the United States or however, but we'll just leave it blank for now. But when we hover over this, we'll see that it actually returns a string. What this function does is it takes all of the characters inside of here, lowercases it all, and then it returns the lowercased value. Okay? So what you can do is you can say string lower is equal to this result. So that way, first still stays like this, and lowercase is another variable that we've made. However, we can also reinitialize or redeclare first as the result of this. So that means that we would no longer have this Joshua, it would instead become Joshua. It's a little bit more cleaned up, isn't it? We could also, let's say first equals first dot to uppercase. What this would do is it would do the opposite. Joshua. Okay, some people like to have this way, some people like to have it this way, but either is fine. So let's continue going down the line here. First, dot length. Now this one's a little more confusing as to what it does, but all we're doing here is we're retrieving how many characters are inside of the string. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that means this would result in 10. And this, if we hover over it, can be stored in an integer. So we can type int length is equal to the first length. No issues. But if I were to say, again, Boolean, there would be an issue because it cannot convert from an integer to a Boolean. So let's change this back to int. Okay, well, what's next? What else do we have? Well, let's go ahead and go over replacing characters. So let's say first.replace. Oh, we've got an old versus a new character. So let's put in our single quotes because that's what a character is. It's not a double quote. If we go ahead and put in exclamation point and then replace it with a space. So now that turns it into Joshua because the exclamation mark is replaced by a space. Now let's hover over it. This one also has a string return type. So we would need string replaced equals, or we can replace it as is. First equals first.replace. So now this first is going to equal the result of this. If we don't have anything in there, it's not going to replace anything, and we're kind of running this in vain. Okay? It's a little more complicated than what I'm explaining. However, this is a good place to start. Okay? Let's go over a couple more. So let's go ahead and say first.trim. What this will do is it will get rid of any white spaces, new lines, and other such things. So this will take the Joshua like this, and it'll convert it into Joshua like this. Okay, let's hover over it. This one also returns a string. So that means that we should set it equal to either itself, or we can create a new variable, trimmed. That way, first will still remain this, but trimmed will become this. If we go ahead and say first equals first.trimmed, or first.trim, then it turns from this to this stored in the first variable. Finally, let's quickly go over splitting. So this one's also pretty valuable. If we do first.split, and then inside of here, we can put another string, and let's say it's a lowercase caps lock turned on, a lowercase s. All right, this turns it from Joshua into a list of J-O and H-U-A. Basically, it turned our one string into multiple strings. And so it becomes J-O and H-U-A. Okay, so I've created 3 string variables here. One is first name, another's last name, and another is the middle area between them. So I made Joshua, Deemer, and a space in the middle. Just my name with a space. Now, what do I need to do in order to combine all of these together as one string? So let's say string full name. I mean, technically, I could say Joshua Deemer, right? But maybe we have, let's say, for example, we have 2 different inputs for first name and last name. Well, we need to be able to put them together. And this vocab word, hopefully I spell it right, is concatenation. All right, so this is, I might have misspelled it, but it's concatenation. So basically, we take 2 or more variables and we combine them together. So what we can do is we can make use of our plus operator. So if we have first name plus last name, this will now become Joshua Deemer. They'll combine together to become Joshua Deemer. But we want that middle area as well, which is why I included it. Middle, come on, area. So now it's going to equal Joshua space Deemer. Okay? The computer does not automatically interpret a space in between. You have to define that yourself. So now, what if I don't want to have this middle area, but I still want Joshua Deemer? All you need to do is you need to create an inline string like this. And usually this is what I do when I concatenate, and it's not that big of a deal, but that's how you can do it. Now, in Java, you can also say we have age equals 25, and then double GPA equals 3.9, sure. Let's say we have these two variables as well. So what if I want to take all four of these and have a string that says a sentence of sorts with that information? So let's say we have an application that has an input for first name, last name, a number input for age, and a number input for GPA, and we need to somehow combine them all together. In Java, it makes it pretty easy. We still use that plus operator. So if we say string sentence is equal to first name plus space plus last name plus is age, years old, and has a GPA of plus GPA plus period. Now, this may look like a lot, but it's not too terrible. Let's break it down a tiny bit. All we're doing is we're creating a new sentence variable. And this sentence variable takes my first name, adds a space, takes my last name, adds is, then takes our age. So the age is 25, and it's a number. We're adding a number to a string. And this is perfectly fine. Okay? Java makes it so that it's easy like that. Then you have adding years old and has a GPA of 3.9, period. So let me go ahead and type out what this will say. This will say Joshua Deemer is 25 years old and has a GPA of 3.9, period. So we add that period at the end. Awesome. And that's how concatenation works. Let's go ahead and practice with strings a little bit. I would like you guys to do this on your own if you could, but if you want to just follow along, feel free. So I want you to create a string with your first name, create a string with your last name, create a string with your school if you go to school, workplace if you go to work, or if you do neither of those, your favorite candy. Then I want you to concatenate the three strings into a cohesive sentence. So pause it now if you want to do this on your own. Otherwise, let's do it now. So let's make a string. First name equals Joshua. String last name equals Deemer. String, let's say candy, is equal to, let's go simple, Hershey's bar. Okay, now let's concatenate them into a sentence. So string sentence is equal to first name plus last name plus, almost forgot something, the space in between my first and last name, plus loves a good old, then we add candy. Then we add an exclamation point at the end. So what this will produce is Joshua Deemer loves a good old Hershey's bar. Now, when we talk about printing, we're not talking about printing to a printer. That's a whole different topic. But when we talk about printing, we're talking about printing to the console, your application, so that you can see information rather than just assume it like we have been in the previous 4 lessons. So let's go ahead and get started with that. In different languages, there are other ways of doing this. For example, C++ is pretty complicated with std cout hello std and l semicolon. With C#, it's a lot more simpler, saying console dot right line hello. With Java, it's a little bit more, it's like in between. If you say system dot out dot print line, this is how you print to the console. You're taking the system files, or the system library that Java provides. You're getting the out stream, which, because you're printing out to the console, you can do system.in if you want to receive input, but system.out prints out to the console, and then you have print line. Okay, if you put dot, you'll see quite a few different possibilities you can have here. But we're interested in print line. And if we say our string hello, this is an inline string. You could also say string hello equals hello, and in here put the variable name instead. These have the same results. So let's put it back and run it. Up here is the run program button. You can also hit debug program. We'll just do run program. So run program. Down here, it printed hello. Let's practice with the console a little bit, because the console is really important to get nailed down. So if you want to do this on your own and try it on your own, I do recommend it. However, we're going to be going over it right now. So let's say we want to create that sentence again in the console. We want to print it to the console. Well, let's first go ahead and print out each individual one. So system.out.println first. Okay. System.out.println last. System.out.print age. System.out.println GPA. Yes, I know I left a line out right there, but I'll show you why in a second. You run this program, you'll notice it says Joshua Deemer 253.9. Well, that's odd. Not really, because I didn't add the ln. So what print does is it takes your text and it prints it to the console without adding a new line. Print line adds the new line so that it's a little easier to decipher. So once I add this ln in and run it, you'll see it turns into 25 and 3.9. Alright, so we figured out how to establish that. So let's break this down a little bit more. So string name is equal to first plus space plus last. Okay, so now let's get rid of one of these and change this to name. If we run this, we'll see Joshua Deemer, Joshua space Deemer. We'll see age and 3.9. Now let's say string sentence is equal to name plus is, and we're gonna concatenate age, years old. We'll just say that. We'll name this partial sentence. So that way we're taking first and last and putting them together. Then we're taking the name, which is the result of first and last, and now we're adding age to it. So now, let's go ahead and remove a line and say partial sentence. Now it should say Joshua Deemer is 25 years old. That's about right, because name is first space last and age is 25. Now let's add in GPA. So string final sentence is equal to partial sentence plus space with a plus GPA plus GPA. Okay? Don't confuse yourself between variables and strings. All right? You don't want to add the quotations around the variables. Let's say you did that. All right? And let's change this to final sentence and run it. It'll say Joshua Deemer is 25 years old with a GPA. Well, that's because we stringified the variable. If we go ahead and remove the quotes and run it, now it says Joshua Deemer is 25 years old with a 3.9 GPA. That's the end of this episode. Next episode, we will be covering conditions in Java. Thanks for watching. Feel free to comment what your thoughts are on the series so far down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss a video. Bye!